Okay, this is the second lecture of the second unit of ATS 113, and this is going to be about forces in the atmosphere and the different kinds of wind or balance that of motion of the air that comes about based on different combinations of forces. The readings are going to be pretty important today. They're going to be pages 100 through 114, and I want to highlight some of the basic concepts that we're going to be covering today. Virtually everything in this reading is going to be very important, so make sure you really read this and understand what you're getting. The first force that we're going to be talking about is going to be the pressure gradient force. This is always the one that students, I think, understand the most easily. The book stresses that there are two different directions the pressure gradient force can be. Here on page 101, they talk about the horizontal pressure gradients. And then on page 102, they move on to talk about vertical pressure gradients. And the balance between the vertical pressure gradient force and the force of gravity gives us our first balance, which is called hydrostatic balance. The book actually spends quite a bit of time on this. We don't spend quite as much as the book, but it's an important concept, so make sure you read it. Okay, so here it's talking further about pressures and the pressure gradient forces in the atmosphere. Don't worry about this text box at the top of page 104. Alright, then pressure gradient force is really the only force that can start the wind in motion, but once the air is in motion, there are a number of forces that can affect its speed or its direction, such as the Coriolis Force. Now this is a concept students always have trouble with. It's our second of our forces in the class. I guess third if you count gravity. There's a nice demonstration in your the CD that came with your textbook. That's highlighted down here in the red box. There's also some demonstrations on the course CD. There's a video, there's some flash animations. Coriolis Force is pretty hard to understand. That's why I like this blue box that's on this page, which at least summarizes the very basic stuff. If you know nothing else about the Coriolis Force, you need to know the stuff that's in the blue box. Your third force is introduced on here as well. We're talking about the force of friction. That's usually pretty straightforward. I like this little activity that's on your course CD, your textbook CD. It's highlighted in red down here in the bottom right on page 107. And let's see, I don't know that the text box here at the top of the Coriolis Force is more than anything just kind of for your personal interest. Okay, now, with these different forces, you can achieve what we call geostrophic balance. This is going to be our second kind of balance. It's going to be the kind of balance that you get when the winds are flowing straight and are above the Earth's surface. And there's also going to be our third type of balance called gradient balance, which is going to be when the flow is curved and above the surface. These are very important concepts. We're going to be talking about them at length in class. To actually understand the gradient balance, you also have to take into account a fourth force, the centrifugal force. In practice, the book doesn't have any special description of it because I think everybody understands the centrifugal force. Here's an important concept, though, near the bottom of page 110, this idea of subgeostrophic and supergeostrophic winds, because gradient winds will tend to either be subgeostrophic or supergeostrophic, depending on whether the flow is rotating clockwise or counterclockwise, and we'll discuss this quite a bit in class. Finally, your near-surface winds, which don't have a special name for that kind of balance. That kind of balance is sometimes called Goldberg-Mohn balance, although this book doesn't use that term. But when you get near the surface of the Earth and you have to take into account friction, that's another type of balance. And we'll see examples of this on the course CD and so on. A fifth type of balance, which your book doesn't discuss in this section, is called cyclostrophic balance, and this is the kind of balance that creates the winds around, say, tornadoes and dust devils. And there's more information about that on your course CD. The rest of this reading, the remaining 3 or 4 pages, are all about cyclones, anticyclones, troughs, and ridges. And this is just different structures that result in the wind flow based on what forces are working and the directions of the forces and so on. And so we're going to be talking about cyclones. I really like this diagram at the top of page 112. I like these demonstrations on your course CD on the side of page 112. Don't worry about the diagrams that are for the southern hemisphere. We're not going to do southern hemisphere stuff in this class. So some of these plots here are showing how cyclones and anticyclones work in the southern hemisphere. Don't worry about that. And finally, stop at the top, well, it's kind of the middle of page 114. Alright, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, let me know. We're going to be talking about it in length in class, but the text will definitely make you better prepared. And if you don't read it until after the lecture, it'll definitely help summarize what we did and help you understand what it all means. And this has been Dr. John Shruggy, copyright 2006.